So anyway.
Where did you travel?
On those 3 submarines, we did mostly local operations out of San Diego, but we did deliver the one ship to Turkey via the Panama Canal.
Was there any problems getting through the Panama Canal at that time?
No. Our first child was born while I was literally passing the canal. During that time, I attended several other schools on temporary duty. Went to sonar school, went to a 6-month electronics repair school. There was a tremendous need at the time for young officers to be qualified in radar and sonar, which was pretty new stuff. With the sonar types that were involved. So anyway, I had 6 months of schooling on that subject.
Where did that take place? Is it
Treasure Island, San Francisco area.
Okay.
And from there, I was sent to Pearl Harbor, where I became chief engineer of a diesel boat. And a captain who was a Medal of Honor winner on the San Francisco at Pearl Harbor. A fairly famous guy. He came to treat me like royalty. He seemed to think I could do it all right. And that wasn't true, of course, but when it was time for me to leave his ship, he handed me a detachment fitness report that was written in pencil and said, if you want to change anything, please do. So I found a few more examples of my glorification and put them in.
Right.
And he signed it. That was near the time of my feeling that my career was on the upswing. I left that ship to go to postgraduate school. The submarine detail officer in Washington, who was in charge of placing young officers in their next assignment, advised me not to go to postgraduate school. He thought it would be better if I did something more in line with operations. And I thought about it long and hard, but nevertheless decided to apply for postgraduate school. In the course that most closely represented training for nuclear bombing. And by that time, word was beginning to trickle out, and we began to hear about Nautilus and Admiral Rickover.
The Nautilus, is that
Our first nuclear submarine.
U-571?
Pardon?
Is that U-571? Is it the...
Yeah.
I think so. Or the SSBN?
No.
No?
It was an attack boat. I think 571 is correct. Anyway, it went to sea in about 1955. So anyway, I went to PG school and studied hard and excelled. I stood first among about 600 naval officers.
Oh, wow.
And as it later turned out, led to my being called in for interview by Admiral Rickover and joining his program. Before that happened, when I finished PG school with high marks, I was sent to the Oak Ridge School of Reactor Technology, the National School for Reactor Design, where I spent a year in very fast company. It's a school that Admiral Rickover himself had been to for his acquired knowledge.
Is that, were people dropping out? Is that why it was such fast company? Were they leaving real fast, or?
No, the factor that was important was a high factor of selection. They would then write an outstanding engineering graduate of colleges from all over the country and say, would you like to come and study at our school and be paid for doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had some pretty fine students. And anyway, I worked hard, did well among the half dozen naval officers who were there, but I stood in the middle of the total class. From there, I was ordered as exec of a diesel submarine in Key West, the only spot where I ever served that my wife didn't like.
Why is that?
We then had 2 small boys as well as an older daughter. We lived in an upstairs apartment. I was at sea a lot.
Yeah.
My wife would have to tote one baby on each hip and then go back for the groceries. And one boy got coral poisoning by having mosquito bites on his chest that became infected with coral dust, which is bad news. The other boy developed pneumonia. Couple that with the fact that the school system for the daughter was very, very poor at that time. And you can't be surprised that my wife didn't think well of the
No, I agree with her.
But anyway, I had to do such things as go to Mardi Gras at Mobile Bay, Mobile, which was tremendous fun.
Mardi Gras, so mom's back at home with the kids,
Yeah.
and you're just Mardi Gras.
Yeah. And I could tell that I was on the fast track. My Commodore, senior captain, invited me to go fishing with him, and he didn't invite my captain. It was sticky.
Oh.
But it also told me something. So anyway, during that time I was among 14 who were selected early for lieutenant commander. And I had to write a thesis as part of my being designated as qualified for submarine command. And in my thesis I told them what alternate designs we might consider for our nuclear power plant. Fortunately for me, Admiral Rickover never knew about that.
What was your design?
Well, he had already made up his mind what was the best design.
Oh, okay.
Wouldn't tolerate somebody suggesting that something else might be a better choice. But anyway, after less than a year, I was relieved and sent to my own command in New London, a diesel boat. I served less than a year on the Intremador as captain, most of that time in the Mediterranean, and then was interviewed, called and interviewed by Admiral Rickover to join his program. And we know now that he never wanted anybody to feel they had it made.
Okay.
He was happiest if they left the interview thinking that they had failed. And he threw me out, and I thought I had failed. And it was a program which didn't do the Navy a lot of good, in my opinion. A lot of fine officers were rejected. And he had brought about a requirement in the Navy through Congress. He had his strength through Congress, not through the Navy, declaring that all future submarines would be nuclear powered. Well, and that interrupted the flow of responsibility and experience in command for a lot of good submariners. But anyway.
Well, how did you...
In time, he interviewed another of my classmates and then let me know that I was selected.
Okay.
Now, my job at that time was that of, they said, to become executive officer of the Triton, the world's then the world's largest submarine being built. That was fun. A lot of prestige. The captain was Ned Beach, a famous naval officer.
Yeah. Largest submarine ever, you know. It's,
Yeah, 2 reactors.
you know.
Well, the rub was that Admiral Rickover hadn't told his assistants that the engineer of Triton had to be my classmate Les Kelly, who had been the engineer, the original engineer of Nautilus.
Oh.
And Les was good enough to say that was fine with him. I was 1 number senior to him,
Oh.
only.
Oh.
We were both among the 14 that had been accelerated,
Yeah.
and I had ranked him by a few numbers, and he ended up 1 number ahead of me. And he said that was fine with him, but I and everybody else knew it wasn't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
He was experienced in nuclear power, and I was not. So I was redesignated to go to Idaho and be executively training facility for nuclear power out in the desert at Idaho at the National Reactor Test Site.
Okay.
To give you an idea how the program was booming, how I was in on the major step forward. When I arrived, they were turning out 30 officers every 6 months. 30 officers and men combined. 30 every 6 months. When I left 2 years later, we were turning out 300 every 3 months. A bit of a growth spurt.
Yeah.
Big building program.
I'd say so.
And I learned that Admiral Rickover was very training conscious, very safety oriented, and that indeed I was in a prime position for my relative seniority in his book. And it used to be required that I would talk to him every week. If he had failed to call me and a week was about to pass, I called him and told him what was going on. I took a lot of abuse during those 2 years. He had his ideas about how things ought to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sometimes required to work at odds with what I personally believed. I had been taught that you praise in public and criticize in private.
Right.
He thought just the opposite. You get top-notch people and kick them in the ass. Tell them every day that they're on the verge of failure and being kicked out of your program. That's how you get results. And I had to admit that his system, in some respects, worked better than traditional systems.
Yeah.
He used to tell me that I was to flunk and kick out at least 10% of my students. I never did. I made some increased effort over what I might have done by my own lights, but nothing like 10%.
How so? How so? How so did you increase your efforts?
Well, I wouldn't have kicked out as many people as I did
Yeah.
if I had been on my own,
Oh, okay.
even with heavy emphasis on safety and success in the program and so forth. Well, anyway, I was still pretty much his golden boy. I'll take time out for a sea story here that illustrates what kind of guy he was to work for. An officer 4 years senior to me from the Naval Academy was the representative of the Atomic Energy Commission on the site. He had technical responsibility for running the Nautilus prototype, which was there, and later the Enterprise prototype, which was when critical during my time. He was a tenant and therefore subordinate to me as commanding officer. He was a tenant in my command.
Okay.
I was his training officer. It was so intermixed. And that was the way Rickover worked. You never pay attention to seniority. Everybody reported directly to Rickover.
Yeah.
And told him how the other guy was doing, as well as what he was doing. So this AEC rep and I became closely involved and made up our minds that we were sinking or swimming together. And we started driving together every day, 57 miles from town out to the desert and back. And we would talk incessantly, telling the other guy what was up in our own field.
Yeah.
And working as a team. Well, a day came when we did something that mightily displeased Admiral Rickover. I don't remember what it was, but and there were lots of occasions where he was
sure
somewhat displeased, but he was mightily displeased with something we had done. So he hops on an airplane and comes out to the site to tell us so. And at one point there are just three of us in a room. And he's giving his attention to the more senior officer and lambasts him and tells him how stupid he is and so forth, to the point that eventually he breaks down in tears in front of his junior. Not exactly good stuff.
So that was Rickover who broke down?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
No, Rickover broke.
Yeah, it broke the other guy.
Yeah.
Okay, whew.
And then suggests that he leave the room and recover, so, which he gratefully does. Rickover then turns to me and starts to give me the same treatment on the same subject. And I'm so shook up that finally I lose my cool and my sense of rank and prestige and everything else. And I say to Admiral Rickover, please shut up. There's nothing more you can say or do to make me feel any worse than I do right now. Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Changes the subject back to living like normal.
He's just testing you, or not testing you.
Yeah,
Sounds like he was.
He decided he'd chewed me enough.
It's like, oh, okay, you're good? Okay.
But that's the only time I ever successfully manipulated that man. He was a bear.
Well, that situation, you guys are in the room alone, and
Yeah.
what do you do?
Well, he went on to talk about other things in a very normal tone of voice.
Maybe a little awkward. A little.
Anyway, I lasted. I had had two predecessors in that job, and he had fired one of them. The other one went on to make Vice Admiral. And I left with my skin intact. Not quite as much of a shine as when I had been sent, but in good shape career-wise.